Okay, it looks like we have a bunch of folks on. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Um, this is the March 17th, 2025 meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. My name is Diane Cece. Okay, so just to quickly run through the agenda, and some of these are actually just announcements. Whoops, sorry about that. So the first one up here is we just got official notice today from the Walkbridge Project public engagement team that the closing of Strawberry Hill Avenue at Winfield at the Metro North Bridge overpass there has now been scheduled to start on Monday the 31st. And that closure or this phase of the closure is expected to go right through October. They are going to be posting detours. We have some of that information now. And of course, they've coordinated all of this with the Norwalk Traffic Authority and the police department and coordinated with the other DOT projects. And I will confirm this, but I would hope, and I'm pretty certain that they would have also coordinated this with the Eversource closures that were going on as well, because they're all supposed to collaborate in terms of the work that's being done over by Smith Street and Seaview. So we'll have some more information on that. I was just mentioning to someone that the folks from Walkbridge, I didn't see any of them hop on tonight, but they're willing to come in at any time. As we get some more information on this, we'll try to pass it along. But one of the things that we always urge you to do is to sign up for their notices and to follow these projects on their website, and which is Walkbridge CT, or info@walkbridgect.com. And then the website is walkbridgect.com. A bunch of public hearings and city meetings as usual. At this point, we're not really going to post all of them here because things change. And of course, there's meetings and hearings every week. So we urge you to go on to the norwalkct.gov website and go on to meeting notices, and you can follow everything there. If it's a hearing that's of particular interest to East Norwalk or on an East Norwalk parcel, then we'll be sure to make sure that we get that information out to you folks as well. And another, not necessarily a city meeting, but the Manresa Island Park organization has now posted the date for their second community engagement session. This is going to be May 8th. And I think I have a little slide on that coming up, but it's also going to be at Brian McMahon High School. And we'll have the link for you so that you can register for that. We don't have any guest speakers tonight, but we do have, speaking of Manresa Island, we do have the executive director of that new endeavor, Jessica Bonashek, will be joining us at our April meeting. So we can look forward to a presentation from her. And in the meantime, we do encourage you to visit their website, fill out their survey. You can watch the videos, recap of their first engagement session, which we also posted in our email this past weekend for you as well. Under current business, we're going to get a brief overview from Roberta Di about the upcoming Veterans Memorial Park restoration plan, the Shoreline restoration plan. As I told you last month, the feasibility study was finalized. And we're going to be looking forward. I'm not sure if Roberta has information on this yet, but we'll find out. We'll be looking forward to a full presentation from the stakeholder group and the project team at a later date. Tonight, we'll also be talking a little bit about the new application that came in for a land zoning text amendment and a special permit application at 10 Norden Place, one of our favorite properties to follow. And this is called an application for a use called a car club, and then a special permit application for actually to approve the use of the facility for a car club. And I'll share a little bit about that as well when we get there. Also tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about some current zoning and blight violations that are in the neighborhood. These are the ones that ENNA has been involved in ourselves, but there could be many more. And we do encourage you to reach out to us if there's a particular property that is blighted or has zoning violations, and if you think that things aren't moving through the city hall process the way that they should to get things remedied quickly and effectively. Okay, we just spoke about Manresa Island and the upcoming engagement session. And then not really new business, but just want to remind everyone, please, if you can, mark your calendars. We are confirming the 6th annual Community Shredding Day. Would have been nice if I had the date there, but it's Saturday, April 19th, and it's going to be from 9 to 11. We posted the details in this weekend's email, and we'll remind you as well. Thank you to, I think I see a bunch of the volunteers on here tonight, and thank you to the folks who come out on their Saturday morning and help us with that. And then finally, if we have some time at the end, we still want to talk about getting your feedback on what forums and workshops and guest speakers that you'll be interested in for this coming year. There's a few that we think we might want to line up, but we really want to bring in folks from the city and other areas of interest that you really want to hear from. And we're going to look into getting back into doing some workshops and community forums. Okay, so I'm not going to read this whole thing, but this is the notice that we got from the DOT and the Walkbridge folks late this afternoon regarding Strawberry Hill Avenue being closed under the Metro North Railroad Bridge at Winfield. They are going to maintain access to the businesses that are right there. I believe pedestrian access is going to be available as well, and they're posting the detour information. You can see that down here at the bottom of the screen where they're directing cars to go to. And I believe that they have a detour route for any trucks as well that go through there. I didn't see a map of the detour posted yet. But if that hits their website, then you might want to take a look there, and we'll try to post that as well. And this was just their official notice of the closing for the detours, northbound and southbound between Fifth and Winfield. There'll be posted detour signs and routes. I think during some or most of the work, there probably will be some official traffic, either police or flagmen that are directing traffic. As I said, the property and business access will be maintained. They'll do their best to minimize the noise, and the schedule is, as always, is subject to change. So keep an eye on their website and get on their email list as well. Okay, and then just briefly here, just wanted to let you know that this is a picture actually of the rendition of the proposal for Manresa Island under the private development that the McCords are looking to do. Their next public session is at Brian McMahon on Thursday, May 8th, again from 6 to 8:30 p.m. You can visit their website at ManresaIslandPark.org. There's a bunch of details there. They've posted their first session. Their survey is posted there, and you can RSVP to go to the second session. There's no cost to attend, and I'm sure you can just go in, but they do like to try to get a head count as well. Okay, and with that, I think if we have Roberta ready. I think this is the point we wanted to talk a little bit about the shoreline and sustainability and resiliency restoration over at Veterans Memorial Park.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot. It was a really great pleasure to be part of this Shoreline restoration feasibility study. I am by trade an ornamental horticulturist, and I know a little bit about ecological restoration, but this was definitely something that was out of my wheelhouse. My husband and I live very close to Vets Park. I mean, we can see it from our window. We're right on Osborne, right off of Seaview. So this is a project that's very close to my heart. We use the park a lot. I know a lot of us in East Norwalk use the park a lot. And one of the things that I really love about it is that it's a place where you can really get up close and personal, and most of the time in a quiet way. I love the beach, but on season it can be pretty noisy, so it's kind of not my idea of connecting with nature, being in a place where there's like tons and tons of music and loudness and all that. It's good for some people. Obviously, people like that. But the nice thing about Vets Park is that it's sort of this little hidden gem. And hopefully it will be used for the purposes of quiet enjoyment, although I suspect that the Parks and Recs Department in the city of Norwalk have some ideas to activate it, but that was not part of this feasibility study. I'm going to give you a very, very quick overview. I do think that it would be great for us to have the Maritime Aquarium and representatives from the city. I'm not sure if they're still under contract with Biohabitats, which is the company that conducted this feasibility study. But there are other people involved in this who have a lot more knowledge about it than I do. But I'm going to give you a brief overview because I think it's something that we're all interested in. So the design objectives were to increase the site resilience. As anyone who has walked around Vets Park knows, there's an asphalt pathway that goes very close to the shore that's been eroded. It's been in an absolutely horrible shape since Sandy. It wasn't in great shape before that, but Sandy really knocked it to the ground. So in terms of the rising tide levels and climate change, they are trying to increase the capability of the site to recover from these natural events in a better way. Mitigate flooding. Again, anyone who's spent any time at Vets Park knows that that parking lot off of Seaview is underwater. I'm sure that many of the people that are here in this meeting now know a little bit of the history of the Vets Park site. It was originally, I believe, a dumping ground. It was referred to as Duffy's Field. I didn't live here at the time. I don't know. But you can tell that it's landfill, as is Seaview Avenue. So the sound and the natural world is trying to encroach on its space. We've sort of taken it over. So this feasibility study is also concerned with figuring out ways to mitigate flooding. Because there's a lot of flooding going on there, and not just in the parking lot, and some of the playing fields as well. Improving public access was also an important objective. Again, pathways, restoring and enhancing the natural habitat in the park as well. Ecologically, the shoreline is very important to not only the creatures that live in the water, shellfish and fish and all of that, but also in terms of the plant life. So they're also trying to, part of the objective is also to enhance the habitat so birds and other creatures have safe places to be. Reducing erosion. There needs to be a whole lot of stabilization going on throughout the park. Very, very early steps with this, everyone. This is just a feasibility study. It's going to be quite a while before there's any shovels in the ground over there. So the key considerations here, and you can see this is, I really was impressed with how they presented all this information because it was very clear and concise. There are specific drivers, there were specific project objectives, and then there were design options. I can also share this entire presentation, not just these little slides that I'm showing you now, but I can share the whole thing with anyone who wants to. Just send Diane an email at info@eastnorwalk.org, and I'll be happy to send them to you. They're on a Google Drive, so you'll have to sign onto Google Drive. So there's a lot of coastal flooding. There's increased, I think the MHHW stands for like mean high water
Mhm.
mark or something like that. Project objective is resilience, again, flood mitigation, erosion, park usability, habitat restoration, and enhancement. One of, I think, the key elements here is that to create a boardwalk, really, that will be higher than the highest tide levels. So that whole area near the shoreline doesn't get washed out and people can still walk there. I mean, that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. So again, these were the conclusions of the feasibility study to replace the pathways with boardwalks, um, shellfish habitat in the intertidal mudflat zone, grading of the nearshore parkland zone to target low and high marsh elevations, planting of native marsh and marsh transition vegetation in areas that are lowered, meadow restoration in areas that remain upland, daylighting stormwater pipes within the project area. For those who don't know, daylighting is a term that's used when you're uncovering things that have been buried by infrastructure. For example, there are a lot of rivers that have been covered by uh, cement, actually. Believe it or not. And sooner or later, the water is going to burst up. So in this case, we're talking about water pipes, and then installing bioretention systems, which are basically, as far as I know, that's basically a rain garden. It will reduce the retention of rainwater. So a rain garden would be one example of that. There's probably others as well. These are the next steps. There's a long way to go. I mean, they've got a lot of meetings and a lot more work to do before they come up with an absolute final plan. They've got to do subsurface investigations so they can understand the existing substrate in the park. They need to do a topographical and utility survey. They need to do hydrodynamic and sediment transport modeling so they can quantify the erosion risks. There's going to be coordination with the city Recs and Parks Department maintenance teams so they can understand the capabilities for proposed design approaches. Park use survey to understand the needs of guests. I encourage everybody to get involved in this. At some point, they're going to have to throw it over to the general public because really all of us in Norwalk are stakeholders of this park. I know for me personally, I don't want to see a lot of amplified music there. We already have Pride happening there. We already have the Oyster Festival. To me, that's quite enough for the neighborhood. Not sure how other people feel. They may feel differently, but whatever it is you feel, please participate, because I do think that there's going to be an opportunity to do that farther down the line for more people. There will be a pre-application meeting with DEEP, and I don't even know what USACE is, but apparently they need to be involved as well. And there are other funding proposals that they're going to want to work on. Apparently, the city has already secured funding for resilience design, and the other potential funding opportunities are listed there as well. I think just my personal takeaway from this is that biohabitats did an awesome job. I was so impressed with how professional and clear they were. I think that the city and the Maritime Aquarium did a great job in contacting people and organizing this. I mean, really, hats off to them. for sharing all of this information, and they answered a lot of questions from those of us who were involved in this planning stage. My main concern is that if really and truly this plan is about restoring habitat, that's in direct opposition to the city activating this park for more loud public events. So I know that there's going to have to be some sort of a balance involved in this because it's open space and we don't have a lot of open space. But this is mostly a residential neighborhood, and there are some issues around activating the park in a loud way and actually creating habitat for birds and shellfish and all the other creatures that use this park as their home. So I'm hopeful that that will be considered when they figure out what the final plan is. So thanks for listening, everybody. That's what I've got. And if you have any questions,
Thank
you
you.
can send them to Diane. Thank you, guys.
There you go. Thank you so much, Roberta. That was great overview. I think we had posted the study, but it's great to hear someone who actually was the stakeholder representative for ENNA on that. And I know that, one of the questions that I have, and it looks like you folks did talk about it, was the balance of the restoration versus the master plan for the parks, where they're always trying to balance active and passive recreation. And it's always, I don't want to say it's a battle, but it's a delicate balance, and stakeholder groups have different interest in that. And I think it would be, the city would be remiss if going through this type of effort, looking at it not just from the flooding and the resiliency, but for what Roberta was just talking about with the restoration of wildlife and the habitat. And I think that's an important component of this that, at some point folks may decide is something that is weighted at, a value that's weighted higher than the active recreation that they propose and that they're using now, as a matter of fact. Okay, so Charles, if you don't see any questions on that, I'm going to go back to share my screen. Oh, and the other thing I want to say on that is we'll reach out to the actual study group to see when they might be available to come in and do a full presentation to us, or if they're going to do some public events. Then what we'll do is we'll post that, and folks can attend on their own as well. Okay, so the next thing that we wanted to talk about is the application that you may have seen in our emails or on social media. There are 2 new applications in for 10 Norden Place. This would be in addition to the application that was approved for Metro North and MTA for transportation maintenance terminal there. You may recall that that application was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, but then appealed by the legal abutters of the apartment complex there. And that is still winding its way through court. At the last time I checked the docket, it's coming up for hearings in, I think it's in mid-April. So we'll keep an eye on that. But this is actually part of the same structure that's up there at Norden Park. And this is there's actually 2 applications here. Let me see if I put these slides in there. But while you're looking at this, I can tell you that this is a luxury auto warehouse and storage facility using a rack system. And presumably that's what these racks look like right here that they're proposing. The application came in at the end of February. We really got the first look at it on March 4th. But when I say we, I'm talking about ENNA, We believe that this is going to be fast-tracked, and we've been told that it could come before the Planning and Zoning Commission as soon as April 2nd for their preliminary review. Okay, so there's actually two applications that came in. I'll try to not get this too technical, but it's really good for folks in the community to become familiar with this terminology. The first part of the application is called a zone text amendment. And what that is it's a request for an amendment to an existing zoning regulation to allow a new use or to change a particular use in a zone. And so the zoning text amendment that this applicant has filed, Liz Suchy is the attorney, by the way, who's representing them. The new land use in this zone is called Car Club. And the reason they have to file a zone text amendment is because there's no such use defined, that covers quite what this endeavor is. Right now, at Norden Park, there is an approved use for something called, I think it's a transportation or automobile storage, but that doesn't really cover what these folks are looking to do. By the way, where I have SDLI here, that's just for the zone that's in, which is a special district for light industrial. And there are more of those that are in East Norwalk and scattered around the city. Once a zone text amendment is approved, then this particular use called Car Club would then be allowed in any of the other zones that are designated as SDLI. So assuming that they get the zone text amendment, and the commission may consider both of these applications at the same time or one at a time, but assuming that they get the approval for the zone text amendment to approve this as a new use, they then have in already a special permit application for the actual application to have this facility there. And the special permit application, I'll remind you, is one that requires a public hearing, and it also compels the commission to consider 13 special conditions when they're looking at this application. Most of the conditions have to do with impacts to quality of life in the neighborhood. And so unlike a site plan review where they just have to look to see whether or not it complies with the technical zoning regulations, and then they must approve it, a special permit gives them discretion and leeway into whether or not they approve it, and if they do, how many conditions they may impose upon it to mitigate any negative impacts on a neighborhood or the city. So the special permit application itself is for a 137,000 square foot auto collective club is the name of the organization, and it would be in Norden Park at 10 Norden Place. And let me see if there we go. It would consist of 137,000 square feet in that warehousing and manufacturing facility would consist of 84,000 square feet for luxury automobile storage. And it would be, now they're not suggesting this, but it could hold up to 420 vehicles as part of this rack system that would be in that main chunk of the building. I'm going to come back and answer questions once I go through this, and we can come back and talk about this a bit more. Another 27,000 square feet is going to be for what they're calling member and member-sponsored event space. So if you think about this facility as being storage for these vehicles, the mechanism for that is that people who own those vehicles would actually become members of this organization called the Auto Collective Club. In doing some research about similar endeavors like this across the country, I also saw that there are not only members, but there are different levels of membership, and some of them even have equity membership as well. We're not quite sure what it would be made up here, but it would be member It would be member driven and equity driven, and so it's not a facility that's just open to the public. And here where they say member and member sponsored event space, the members themselves and the organization can have events that are things like Formula One racing events, social events, theme type events, and members can actually sponsor events too. That would be engaging the public, but it would have to be sponsored by a member. We're not quite sure how far they're going in the definition of those. We do know in the application she filed that they did identify it as mostly being on the weekends. But depending on what the space ends up looking like, and if it's anything like the other facilities around the country that are very, very high-end luxury services and amenities and the environment of these facilities, it could be something where they could hold a member, say, could rent out the space, not rent out the space, but they could sign up the space for events, say for weddings or organizational events or holiday parties, for example. Another 20,000 square feet is what they're designating as the member club area. So this would be for the use of the club. And I think this is also an area where they would be like having screenings and private showings and other parties, and not quite sure what else would go on there, but. And then another chunk is 5,000 square feet for what they're calling a member lounge. So it's a little bit more intimate, a smaller gathering place. And either as part of that or in addition to that, they're also going to have some small accommodations for office and, say, conference room and meeting space as well. And then important to note here, when you're seeing events and you're seeing this organization, is that that the events and the organization itself would be eligible for food and liquor services for their events and their club area and their lounge. Before I go on to the next segment of this, just want to let you know, because if you folks are like me, I don't really understand, I can't visualize square footage, so I always have to look up something as an example. So if you're looking at 137,000 square feet, that is a little bit more than the square footage that I looked up and found that Costco warehouse is. So if you've been in the Costco warehouse on the Post Road, this appears to be a little bit larger than that. In terms of the event space and the club areas, the 27,000 square foot and the 20,000 square foot are both approximately double the size of the Rite Aid that's on East Avenue. So if you're trying to visualize how huge these spaces are in this facility, they're really, pretty big, double the size of the Rite Aid. And then the facility itself is larger than the Costco. Okay, so one of the first things that we considered is that we're always kind of looking at the lesser of two evils and considering all of the other uses that are still allowed in that Norden Park, despite our best efforts to get a lot of them out of the approved list, and some that are approved by site plan review alone. This does seem to be less objectionable than the currently allowed uses and some other uses that could crop up in the future. But the question here is it really, less objectionable? And so ENNA is compiling a list of questions. Some of them are going to be very technical and specific to the application information itself, the permit, the architecture, the landscaping, drainage, restrictions on outdoor uses, traffic analysis, etc. And then also physical, like to understand where this is located in the structure itself relative to the portion that is the MTA operation which if you think of the back of the building really runs along the railroad tracks and then over into the parking lot as you're heading to Halsted. This appears to be in the front of that would be facing I-95 to the north. And I can also say to that, like, I'm not quite sure exactly where it is. It's a little tough looking at the plans, but I will be meeting with P&Z staff, Brian Baker, this week to get a complete walkthrough on the application itself, and he can answer all of my questions. Liz Suchy did reach out to ENNA, I can tell you, to look to try to coordinate a meeting with our board. And I won't go into details, but I can tell you that for a number of reasons, we're just not able to make that happen in a way that would be respectful of our time and anything that would be useful and effective at this point. Not to say that we're not going to be able to do it in the future, but we're not doing it at this point, and especially if this is coming possibly up on the April 2nd agenda. Okay, so the other thing that we're looking into is what's the pros and cons of actually adding this land use to the light industrial zones. One of the things that we need to consider as a community and as a city is that whenever something like this gets approved in a zone, it automatically means that it's eligible to be approved in any other of the same zone throughout the city. And so I'm sure that Attorney Suchy will review that with the commission, but we'll also take a look at what other areas in the city under light industrial would qualify for this, because we'd also want to know if it's something that could, proliferate. And then we have, I can't imagine there'd be a whole bunch of these in the city, or that there's a need for something like this, but I don't really know at this point. We'll also be looking at the pros and cons of this actual application at Norden Place for the parcel itself and for the immediate neighbors there, because it technically is a residential neighborhood that surrounds it, and also for access coming through East Norwalk, which is a very important component to us, as you know. And then finally, looking at any of the burdens and benefits to East Norwalk and the city in terms of the pros and cons. Some folks on social media, you'll see where we've already posted this. We've identified things like, you have a use like this and it's not going to put a real drain on city services, such as the school system. There's not likely to be a real strain on the city sewer system, or emergency services, or any of the other services in the city that other more intensive uses like residential or restaurant or commercial uses would have. And then we're taking a look at what would be the benefits to both East Norwalk and the city. And we do look at this largely from 2 points of view. One, if this is a type of use that's going to be in there, we would imagine it's long term. And it does mean then that perhaps some of the more objectionable uses that we're really concerned about would then kind of go away, just because it would be there wouldn't be that much space left for, like the dreaded Amazon distribution center that we thought we were almost going to get. But the other thing that we look at is what is the benefit to the community in terms of, is this going to create any meaningful, well-paying jobs? Is it going to be something, it appears to be something where everything is all inclusive in this space, so we don't see that there's probably any opportunity for an economic benefit to the community in terms of people patronizing restaurants or hotels or gift shops or any of the services within East Norwalk or the city. The very nature of this type of business as well doesn't suggest to me that there would be any significant addition to the city's grand list, which is really important when you're looking at economic and community development. I think that the city should be looking for things that bring in good paying jobs and bring some economic boom to the area, but that also add to the grand list. And it's there within this building, the vehicles that are just being stored there wouldn't be subject to tax as far as we know. Although someone did raise the question about whether they'd be subject to property tax if they're there long term within the city. And we do have that question on our list. But presumably some of the only other things that would be adding to the grand list actually fall under personal business property taxes, would be like desks and chairs and computers and possibly this rack system. So we're not looking at a big financial impact as best we can tell. But that's one of the things that I'll be looking at and asking the city folks about. And while I'm going through this too, I just want to take an opportunity to say to you folks that any of the questions that you have now or you're going to have, or that ENNA comes up with as well when we're talking about this, we really hope that two other groups are asking these questions and many more. City staff, obviously, within planning and zoning, and all the other departments that have to sign off, like DPW and fire and health and all that good stuff. But we really need to make sure that the planning and zoning commissioners that are appointed to consider these things for a special permit are asking all the right questions and getting answers. And then maybe the most important thing when we're looking at this type of use in our community is what are the possible reasonable conditions that could be imposed to make sure there's a preservation of quality of life coming through the neighborhood and in the immediate to the immediate abutting residential properties there. For example, the application does state that there wouldn't be any outdoor storage of the vehicles. There wouldn't be any repairs of vehicles or maintenance of vehicles or cleaning of vehicles. So there wouldn't be any of that, but we don't know what the impact is going to be in terms of could any of these events actually be partially outdoors? When these events happen, could it be, what is the occupancy of the building for events? Is this going to be something that could hold up to, 500 people? And then we also have the combination of having events that involve liquor being served and basically only one of a couple of ways in to that area. So any large scale events would see not traffic on a routine daily basis, but it could certainly see traffic on the weekends that are all coming at the same time and then all leaving at the same time. Another question that came up that we think we saw in the application, and I'll confirm this, is that any of these vehicles that are owned by these folks would be required to be driven into the facility. So none of them would be coming in on the car carrier systems that you see, like new cars being carried on the highways into dealerships and things. Okay, so Charles, before I leave this,
Yes.
are there things in chat relative to this before we talk a little bit about some?
Well, I think you touched on this before, but Fernando had a very good question about members doing maintenance on their cars. No matter how small, just say like an oil change, hopefully they're not dumping the oil down the local drains. And I would like to add to that, will there be any on-site gas pumps and gas deliveries to that site?
Yeah.
Because
I believe, and I'll double check it, I know for sure that there's no maintenance or repairs that are allowed. I'm going to talk about enforcement in a minute on another topic, but I may as well talk about it now. So to say that they can't do it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. I mean, it's an area that's, very hidden from view, number one. Number two, there typically isn't that type of just routine inspection that gets done in the city for a whole host of reasons, budgets and manpower and I would say the will, the will to do it. Things like that could end up being an infraction, generally are reported by neighbors and residents, because they've observed it. So, but both of those are not supposed to be happening. And I do believe that it's in there that it says that there's no facility there for gas. Okay. And we can certainly, we can come back and talk to this more. And we definitely want folks to take a look in the this weekend's email. And I don't think it was in the one before, but this weekend's email in our newsletter, we provided the link to the Norwalk Planning and Zoning page that has the documents that go with this. They're a pretty easy read, honestly. And even the traffic engineers that were hired to do the traffic analysis for them, I would say did a pretty decent job of the executive summary, in terms of mere mortals like us being able to read the stuff and understand it. Whether, everything falls into the no significant impact, but at least we can take a look at what they're describing as a traffic impact, and hopefully also be able to kind of do a sanity check against what they're saying, versus what the MTA application was saying, for traffic on Strawberry Hill Avenue and Fifth Street and East Avenue. See if those things lined up. I believe when I read the traffic study that they actually, rather than recreate the wheel, I believe they took that study that was already accepted by P&Z, and I think already took the peer review traffic study, and also the city transportation, mobility, and parking comments on those two. So we'll do a little bit deeper dive into that as well. Anybody who has an interest in this particular application, by the way, I may as well throw it out now. If you can volunteer to help us with this review, we would really appreciate it. You can just shoot me an email at info@eastnorwalk.org, and anything you can do to help with this one. Okay, let me go back to my screen and we can come back to this application as well. Where was it here? Also, they note in their application, for the benefit of the planning and zoning commissioners and city staff, that there is a similar similar operation that already exists in Danbury, and I believe their facility is abuts the Danbury airfield that's up there off of Route 7. That the name of that operation, and I believe a link to it is also in the documentation, and I can post it as well. But if you're just looking at that one and you really want to understand what these luxury, and boy, when I say luxury, and I'm talking about affluence and money, if you do a little bit of research, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But what I would do if I were you is Google auto clubs and different combinations of those words, and you'll see that these are popping up all over the country in very affluent communities, and you'll get a sense of what these operations are and how they're owned, and what services they provide, and who their members are and how they operate in those communities. One of the things that would really help if we get a volunteer to help us do some research on this would be great if we, if I gave somebody a couple of names of these other operations in the country, if folks could just call them and get some information or go onto their website and also do some research into how they were welcomed or not welcomed into the communities that they're in today, and if they've been good corporate neighbors, and if they've provided any benefit to the communities that they're in now. Okay, I know this is Rowan. Okay, so I wanted to talk for just a couple minutes on zoning and blight and all kinds of other enforcement in Norwalk, or lack thereof, as we like to say. And I know that folks are familiar with these, so I just wanted to kind of bring these to your attention. But so 28 Rowan Street and 65 Van Zant Street. This parcel has been like this now for coming up on a year. And prior to that, had some other violations that predate that with illegal boat storage, etc. And so ENNA has been trying to get the city to go after this property owner who subsequently demolished the structure that was there. If you don't recognize it looking at this from this angle, this is the former Jimmy's Deli, and you're looking at it from the Rowan Street side to what would have been their back parking lot there. And so here this sits as an eyesore in our neighborhood. The owner of this property has other sites and does redevelopment and remodeling in other communities. He also owns a home in Norwalk with a very long driveway and plenty of space to store the equipment. But he thinks it's okay to dump this and leave it here in East Norwalk. And we don't think that's okay. So we have been after the city to go after him, and through much delay for no good reason that we can find, the city finally got around to acting on this in December, issued citations in January, and started issuing daily fines for both 28 and 65 Van Zant. Because these are still two separate parcels to the city, each one of these parcels gets its own violation. So these fines are actually doubled. And I think they're up to somewhere around $10,000 or $15,000 right now. This particular item comes before, it was already on one zoning citation hearing in January. The owner of the property and the developer, he didn't even bother to show up for that. My personal opinion is that he didn't bother to show up because he knew he didn't have to bother to show up. And that kind of speaks volumes, again, to the lack of teeth that we really have in our zoning and blight enforcement. And hoping it's something that, continues to be a priority of the community to push the city to have additional staffing. And then we also really need to push the state legislature to get some more teeth into these violation fines as well. To many of these property owners and developers, this is just really an expense line for them that's, almost meaningless at this point. Okay, so I didn't want to pass up the opportunity, though, since we're talking about Jimmy's Deli, that the parcel you were just looking at, and the person who owns it and is looking to develop it, just want to remind you that what he has submitted, that is still an application in progress, it's not actually formal yet, is a 22-unit apartment complex. 3.5 stories. You can see the angles here in their architectural drawings. He has yet to submit a complete application to zoning. This has been going back and forth now, I think, for probably 1.5 years or 2 years. And so it's not likely to come before the commission anytime soon unless he submits a complete application. The reason why you're looking at this height of this building, and the number of units as well, is because this part of Van Zant Street, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved this to be part of the transit-oriented development East Avenue Village Transit Zone, or what we call the EVTZ zone. And because it's in that zone, he can apply to provide a certain number of public amenities as part of this application, and then earn bonus points for the amenities that he provides. Those bonus points allow him to have both increased height and increased density within this parcel. So, but we'll certainly bring it up at the time that this thing looks like it might be a real application, because what he's proposing is really like these butterfly gardens and rain garden and stuff that would be actually on this parcel that wouldn't even be considered a public amenity. But somehow he's managed to rack up points that would qualify for this. The same problem that you folks all remember well that we had with the Wells Fargo parcel at Mill Pond. Okay, so that was 28 Rowan and 65 Van Zandt. I just want to bring you up to date on this one. This is 49 Van Zandt. It's next to the library. If this looks familiar to you, it's because this was an application that came in 2022 or in 2023 for 13 units. It was immediately rejected by the community. The planning and zoning commissioners weren't thrilled with it. It met the zoning regulations, but I don't think staff was really interested in it. And they subsequently withdrew their application to redevelop this as 13 units next to the library. But so what's happened in the meantime, though, is as you can see now, our community is left with this blighted, literally unmaintained, falling down, disrepair, and unsightly parcel. And I had assumed that in our community that there had been multiple complaints made to the city through zoning and blight and the health department and through the click and request system and everything. And I came to find out that I couldn't find actually anything that was related to this. It could be that they're there, but I didn't see anything. So ENNA then also immediately filed for blatant zoning violations. And within a couple of days of that, I want to say it was 3 days after that, in the Norwalk Hour happened to be then a notice of intent to demolish. So I guess the decision there was to go ahead now and buy some time, because once you have an intent to demolish, it has to go through a phase of that application. I'm not sure how old this structure is, but it may be subject to a demolition delay, which can go on for 120 days. But regardless of that, by publishing the intent to demolish, I believe that they're now eligible to have to leave this as it is, as they go through the process. And they can also have construction equipment on there because it's a pending demolition. But I do believe there's a time frame for how long they can have equipment there, and before how long they actually have to apply for the demolition permit. So now, PS to this, you can see that there's some equipment that's stored, that orange thing back there behind the building. So that's kind of hidden back there. Anybody driving down the street wouldn't necessarily see any of that. But apparently I'm told by neighbors there that this has been there for quite some time. And at the same time that they filed this intent to demolish, I think it was a week ago, Sunday night, at night in the dark, the owner of this property had excavators that were actually operating at night on a Sunday night and digging up property that was in between them and the library. And of course, there's really no, it's just under the cover of darkness when many of these demolitions and these things happen, because there's no one in the city watching. Residents should be aware, though, just to remind you that if you see illegal construction work, like outside of hours, or something that doesn't appear to have a permit, or something that's violating a noise ordinance, which in this particular case, all three of those things would have been violations. The enforcement after hours goes through the non-emergency number of the Norwalk Police Department. So you can contact them. And then they, I believe they dispatch someone out, and then they will also ultimately contact sometimes the health department or the building department, depending on the severity of what's going on. I think they've been known to come out and just issue like an immediate cease and desist. But in any case, the for as much as the city isn't doing enough with enforcement, it really does fall back to us to make sure that we're, it's on us to make sure that these things are getting reported to the city. In this case, though, I can't imagine how many city employees literally drive by this building every single day. So this one just baffles me, as to why we're in this boat with this. And also, I'm going to see if I can post it. I'm not sure if the person is on here right now that actually provided it, but there's also a videotape of that Sunday night activity that was going on. And we're going to get access to that tape and then make sure we get it to the city, and so that they have it if they haven't already submitted it in. Okay, so just want to go ahead and open it up for any of the topics we covered tonight. If anyone has any questions or kind of an open conversation, if there's any topics that you want to see for the future or anything you want to talk about, we'll go ahead and open everything up. And just before we do that, just so everybody is still on, our next meeting is April 21st. And again, our guest speaker is Jessica Vanashek. She's the executive director of Manresa Island Park Organization, and she'll be coming in and speaking to us relative to the park plans there. Especially for East Norwalk. I mean, that's one of the kind of the iconic views from our side of the river there that we look at all the time. And I'm sure people are interested in this. By the way, if her name sounds familiar, it's because before she took this position, she was actually with the city. She left to take this position, but Jessica was actually the chief of community economic and community development, and she also had planning and zoning under her, and transportation, mobility, and parking, and a number of other departments as well. But she is now with that group.
In chat, actually, Roberta placed something, and this is something I've actually clicked and requested several times and never got an answer to or a response. Wind Bombs building at Van Zandt, the dangerous broken up sidewalk on Osborne Avenue side. The asphalt, has been there for at least 15 years, and it's a serious tripping hazard. And I've sent photos to the city on numerous occasions, and nothing's been done. Does he have a special get out of jail free card with the city?
I mean, there's also machinery. I mean, speaking of machinery, the reason why I was thinking of this was because, his machinery is parked there all the time.
I think two things with that. One, no, I don't think that he has any special thing going on with the city. I know that he's come in with a number of applications, and then things kind of don't fly, and they either get withdrawn or, what have you with the building itself. And I think someone else, I'm not sure if Becca's still on, but I think someone else also wrote too that people aren't getting the responses from the click and request. And when you go in to follow if you're pointing out an issue or a complaint, when you go in, you're supposed to be able to follow that to see if it's in progress, what the status is. There's a number assigned to it.
They close it all the time. Whenever I put in at least 4 requests about this, they just close it.
And there should be a resolution why they closed it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So if you're seeing something that's in progress for a long time, or you're seeing that they've closed it, what I would do is I would send an email into customer service with that tag number for what was assigned to it, and then say, can I get a status on this? And they'll be more specific. But then it's really important if something is closed to say, well, why was it closed? Was it remedied? Was there no, that's really super important. The equipment that's over there, though, I believe there's a right of way and an easement, and there was an agreement that was done with DOT with the walk bridge, where part of his property, they actually have a DOT, the state of Connecticut has an easement coming through part of his property. I think the equipment that you may be seeing there now is related to DOT, but No, it's his. I see you shaking your head. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's his, and also it's the other parking lot near Smith Street where that DOT is using, not the
Mhm.
one on Osborne.
Mhm. The one out by 4 Point Street, you mean, or?
Yeah, well, where the dump is when you make that corner, like to go
Right,
underneath the bridge,
right,
there's another parking lot over there.
right. And that's probably DOT as well, though.
Absolutely. There's a lot of
Okay.
DOT stuff
Yeah,
going there.
yeah. I
And
mean, they're
also
all,
one
they're all over
closer
the
to
place.
the
Yeah,
tracks, but like, no, this is
yeah.
not a DOT
No,
piece.
so if this is related to his property and it's been there and there's no active permit that would account for having equipment there in relationship to the permit, then it's a violation. And so it should be reported in, and whenever possible, pictures really help. But again, I have to say, I just don't want to be a curmudgeon, but I mean, hundreds of city employees are driving by these things every single day. And I don't understand why it's not being addressed, and it falls to us to have to file these things. But unfortunately, it does.
You're preaching to the choir, but we will do that because honestly, I mean, over and over again, they just close it, and
Yeah.
that sidewalk is really treacherous, and there's
Yeah, and that's
a
it.
lot of
And the thing is, when you send that in, and I hate to say this, but I do have to say it, when these things go in and you're sending in pictures, one of the things that it's really helpful to do is just to say, I think somebody's going to get hurt here, and this is a liability.
I get
We've
that.
explained to people
we
in
do
the
it all
past
the
that,
time. We
yeah,
say
and the
that all
thing,
the time.
yeah, I mean, and that's what it's going to take
Okay.
then too, because if somebody gets hurt, God forbid, and the city had no idea that something, on their property, or a homeowner's property, was the cause, and there's really no culpability there for them. But once we notify them, then if somebody gets hurt, it's kind of on them. It's not kind of on them; it's literally on them. So it's just something like that with a dangerous sidewalk, a tripping hazard, and some of these sidewalks that we were after for a couple of years on East Avenue were actually so bad that they were actually pooled water, and you couldn't even see how deep the pooled water was. And then they were just like mosquito and rodent havens, in the spring and summer. But
So we'll follow up by writing to
yeah,
customer service and
yeah,
noting all of the closed
yeah, I would do that.
cases they've done
And
with us.
whenever you can do pictures, it helps. And I also want to remind everyone on here that you don't necessarily have to use the app called Click and Request. Some of us, for a number of reasons, we're just not into having a gazillion apps on our phone, or to having things linked to an app. You can also just send it into customer service at customerservice@norwalkct.org.gov as an email. You can also go to customer service on the city website. And if you click on Click and Request there, it gives you a web page to fill everything out. So a lot of times people are hearing about the Click and Request app, but you don't have to use that. And then also, as another kind of last resort, you can also phone it into customer service. When you're phoning into customer service at 203-854-3200, you should have that number with you all the time. When you're phoning it in, just make sure that you ask them to give you the assigned report case number for it as well.
Okay, I have a raised hand here from
Okay.
Elizabeth.
Hey, everybody. Elizabeth Kenny, Diane. I
Hi.
live on Triangle Street
Mhm.
and was very involved in the Norden Place application.
Yes.
I
Hi.
have a couple of notes, obviously, on the new Norden application.
Mhm.
First of all, you had mentioned event space, 27,000 square foot. My background is restaurant and hospitality management.
Mhm.
When you're renting event space and looking to event space, or if you're looking to rent a tent, you average about 10 square feet per person. So 27,000 square foot is about 2,500, 3,000 people.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So it's a really, really, really big space for events.
Mhm.
if you're looking at like classroom seating or some other type of seating, you might need like 20 or 30 square feet per person.
Mhm.
There's like charts. I'll find one and send it to you via email.
Okay.
Like there's charts online that's like X
Yeah.
amount of feet per person for cocktail party,
Mhm.
seated dinner, dance floor, et cetera, et cetera. But I would say
Thank
on
you.
average, 10 square foot per person for an event is what, if you go to a tent company and rent a tent, they're
Mhm.
looking at about 10 square foot per person for tenting.
Excellent.
So if you
That,
have a 500 person event, you want
Yeah.
a 5,000 square foot tent.
yeah. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Yeah, if you can send that to me, that would be helpful. Actually, I was in the event business myself 100 years ago. But I bet there's all kinds of those things online. If you can send me the links, that would be helpful. I think one of the things, and you'll probably agree with me on this, is, even if they say that these, events are going to be smaller functions, we really need to consider
Yeah.
the maximum, possible. And
Right.
so the fact that it could be, 2,000 people or 1,000 people, we do need to take that into account. And we would hope the planning and zoning commissioners would take that in account. Um, I know it's a thin line between trying to dictate someone's business model and how they run their business model. And I'm not suggesting that the city do that. But I think that it would be a reasonable kind of a resolution to impose something that would set a maximum of number of people, in the building. So even if the fire code said it could be 2,000, maybe a condition of them getting this permitting would be, you know, 500 or something. I'm just making that up as
I
a
have
number.
I have a couple of other points
Mhm.
on the same note. Um, Obviously, it's a car event. If people are, it's a car facility, excuse me, not car event. Um, People want to showcase their cars. If they're doing car events, obviously there will be outdoor events. They will have cars in parking lots. If they are doing outdoor events with cars in parking lots, where will 2,000 people park their cars to attend the events for the cars that are outside?
Yeah, as I understand it, this is not the type of adventure that actually ends up being like car shows or car events. Like these big things that you might see at the beach or other places where the
Right.
public then can come and the hoods are open. It's not that type of a venture. When you go online, if you go online, Elizabeth, and take a look at the one in Danbury and some of the upscale ones around the country, it doesn't seem similar to that at all. And I think the outdoor parking and use is restricted. So
Okay.
if it's not explicit in the permit, it's something that we'd be looking to do because it's not a car show type of thing. It's more storage and then for aficionados to gather and
Right.
mhm.
Really an event space, almost like a car museum where people would be having events and being able to see cars and that type of thing.
Right,
My
again,
last
and
note,
again, it couldn't be the public unless it's a member sponsored event that then like is under their control. So it wouldn't be like they'd be, you know, having a whole event that's open to the public, as I understand it.
but a member sponsored event just means a member has to say,
Mm.
I'm the member and I'm
Mhm.
opening the event to this. Like if you have if country clubs do golf outings
Mhm.
and it's a member sponsored golf outing and there's
True.
people
Right.
sign up for the events that are
Right.
member sponsored.
True.
So
That's true. Yeah. Yep. You're
events,
right. You're
it
right.
doesn't mean that it's members only. It
Right.
means that there's one member that is signing on,
Mhm.
taking the responsibility for the people that are attending.
Right. Which could be then the public. You're right. That's a good point. You're right. Okay.
Last thing, when we were doing the MTA application, the MTA was taking, I forget what the square footage that they were looking at. It was, 300 square foot or whatnot. The leftover space in the building after the MTA was taking space was 500,000 square feet.
Mhm.
The landlord was talking about a 300 square foot data storage facility, which left approximately 200 square feet. This is 137 square feet that they're applying for. What's going on with the extra 300 and
Yeah. I don't know yet because when you
square feet?
yeah, when you look at that property, it's kind of like divided up between a couple of different owners still. So the 300,000, I think the total is 600,000, and then when we take this 130, this one is going to be 137,000 square feet. For the balance of what's left then in the building, if there's an application that's winding through, I have no idea. We only know the list of potential uses that are allowed. One of the things I can tell you that, like with the legal case that's going on now with Metro North, one of the things that's in that case has to do with how the parking is allocated for all the possible uses, right? So even the stuff that would be left empty, they would need to account for what would be, like, say, the highest use that could happen under the existing approved uses, and then account for needing all those parking spaces as well. And I think that's kind of where they're getting away with the size of this facility, because what they're saying essentially is that everything is going to be inside, but they're not defining these larger public events like you and I are talking about. That could be, 300 or 600 cars, that they need to account for with spaces outside.
Yeah, well, I mean, an event for 2,000 people, you're looking at effectively 800 to 1,000 cars if two people, two people come. And overlapping that, if they're saying, oh, these events are mostly weekends, are they saying, okay, well, the MTA parking, where the MTA employees would effectively park, those spots are available for the event space. But would the MTA parking be separate parking that isn't allowed for this?
Right. And even if it is allowed, it can't be part of the computation for this application. They do have to stand on their own. And I'm sure because it's the same owner that there would be an agreement with the MTA for the weekend. I can't imagine why there wouldn't be.
But the MTA hasn't,
but they still have to account for the parking on their own for each use.
Right. And the MTA hasn't said what their weekend accessibility and usability would be either.
Right.
So
the only thing they said in the beginning was that it would be like for emergency repairs for the most part. But then as we got further into the application, then they did seem to say that it could be something that's more 24/7, but with limited activity at night and the weekend.
Right. Anyway, I just wanted to bring those points up.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
A lot.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah. And if any information, just shoot it over to me in the email, please. And let's keep in touch on this one. And, more eyeballs on it, the better.
Yeah. I do have to say, as for usage for the facility, car storage seems to me a reasonable usage, because there's not high traffic.
Right.
It seems like it would be good for the neighborhood. Yes, is there property tax? Maybe not. But anybody that's storing a car has money to spend, and they're coming into the neighborhood. They'd be probably parking their regular car, getting in their special car, driving around, maybe eating or drinking in neighborhood restaurants, using gas stations locally. I think it would be bringing business to our local neighborhood. The events could potentially be problematic, but I would rather see a car storage facility in this space than the MTA.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, of all the possible things that can go in there that are still on the list or could get added to the list, like I said in the beginning, this is definitely among the least objectionable from the neighborhood point of view. And even if it really is self-enclosed and they're not going to provide any economic benefit to the community, the point is that they're not going to be adding kids to the school system. They're not going to be overburdening the sewer system and everything else. And these other the other types of uses really can have a dramatic impact. So
there's no high traffic during rush hour either.
What's that?
There's no high traffic during rush hour.
Exactly.
We're not rolling through rush hour.
exactly.
One other quick point, and I'm sorry I'm taking everybody's
Yep.
time. You had mentioned that this SDLI would overlap with any other SDLIs in the city.
Yeah.
Is this something like, does Liz Succi have multiple clients? Like, is this something that she's like, hey, let's get it approved here and we want to put it into another industry in South Norwalk or West Norwalk or something going on?
That I don't know. I do know that she didn't apply for this as part of the zoning regulation change. So I don't know if this was something that just didn't have the time to examine it that way. But I have to say that I think from the clientele and the nature of this business, that a geographic area can only support so many of them. And where I've seen them in different areas, they seem to be, very spread out because your demographics just don't call for having that many, especially if this one can hold up to 420 cars. So I don't see that happening. I just want to make sure that residents are aware that once it's approved there, it can happen in the other locations. But I don't see that happening. And I didn't see anything in what she submitted that would suggest that. And I just can't imagine that it's as big a market to support that.
I didn't mean so much that they would be doing two in the city of Norwalk. I meant, would they be bait and switching to a different area? Like, is there a pocket in Rowayton or somewhere on the border that they would want to get it approved and then do it somewhere in a better area that they would like better? And it's like, oh, now it's approved in the city. We don't want that space. We want a different space.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't really think that would be the case, because Norden is kind of a tough nut to begin with, and so they probably would have been better off in one of the other ones. There's not a lot of SDLI designated areas, but they probably would have been easier in the other ones. But actually, the other thing to take into account is that the person who's applying for it, the owner of this, is the owner of you have the two owners of the property.
Right.
So you have and in fact, I can tell you that it's Craig Beneroff. It's the same person who purchased that parcel when we were going through the distribution warehouse. What everybody assumed was the Amazon. But anyway, good questions. Thanks, Liz.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm happy to help. I'm
Thank you.
Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play.
Thank you. You're in. Suit up. What did we have here from Patsy though over at St. John? Oh, Patsy, is she still on? Patsy Rupp? I can't see my Brady Bunch box here.
Oh yeah, she's on iPhone.
Yes, I'm on.
Hi, Patsy. It's good to see you.
Hi.
Yeah, I am so concerned about that operation, but also Rite Aid for a whole host of reasons.
Yes.
Can I give you a call or email you and we can set up a little chat?
Sure.
Yeah. But what's going on right now over there with you?
Well, I'm just a little distressed because, I guess the state of Connecticut purchased that parcel of land that used to be Howard Johnson's. That was some time ago.
Right.
And now it's an equipment lot.
Right.
And so there's, it's brightly lit all night. And thankfully, the noise has diminished somewhat. I guess maybe they're not working as much right in our immediate area. So the equipment isn't moving out as much. But all of a sudden, there's a city parking lot there.
Yes. That was actually part of the deal when the state purchased it, that at least a portion of that would be used as overflow commuter lot because of the work being done at the station. But it is controlled through the city and the city parking authority. And as best we can tell, long term, it might actually just become a city parking lot. We haven't been able to get any definitive answers on that.
Okay. Well, I guess my objection is some months back, the city of Norwalk published a heat index map, and one of the hot spots was that whole area. Those two lots in combination with Rite Aid.
Yes.
So
all asphalt. Yeah.
My concern is there's no planting at all. There's nothing done at all to sort of diminish the impact it has on a residential area, and I find it very distressing.
I do too, and I think it's
definitely a quality of life issue.
Right.
My street, definitely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know right now is a bad time because of all the construction on East Avenue. Things are just in constant turmoil, but I would love to know if there's a plan to make that whole section a little more, well, play more like a better neighbor to the neighborhood. I think really they should try a little harder.
I completely agree with you. And I think that we need to, to push them to do that. One of the things that's really a little disturbing about this is that no one had any notion that the state was going to be buying that property. They don't typically do that in these cases. Their contractors actually look to rent out staging and equipment area, and it's short term for the project. But in this case, they bought it. They actually bought it, paid like double what it was worth as well. And one of the first concerns was when we saw all the asphalt going in, which at first they told us wasn't going in. And then there were drainage issues there, so they had to do work with drainage. But you're right, what they've left us with now is asphalt and no plantings and the lights, and it's just not, anything good. I think the real answer there is to try to get someone who can tell us definitively, if not specifically what the long-term plan is, at least to tell us what the options are for long-term plans, so that the community could provide some feedback on what we would want to see there. Because I think the other question is, which is why I mentioned Rite Aid, I think there's some concern with that too, because anyone who's been in there, you don't have to go in the store very far to see that it's post-pandemic and it's still not well stocked. Rite Aid only emerged from bankruptcy in the fall. And so we don't know the future of that. I'm super concerned with that in conjunction with the Hojo property, because both of those fall into this EVTZ zone, the one that is the one that's most, eligible for the most density and height in terms of residential and mixed use. And we don't know, by the time these things see the light of day with us, Patsy, as you know, they are well baked with the state, with the city, with, by the time it becomes an application. So, we've been trying to be proactive and get answers. Whenever we bring up Hojo, basically the DOT tells us that they don't know yet, what's going to happen. And Bob Duff and city officials and the mayor tell us, we don't know yet what's going to happen with that parcel. And Rite Aid, I do know that one of the things we're exploring is maybe, you may not be happy to hear this, but maybe a small community market, a grocery market there, like a cranberry market, a real neighborhood grocer that could be there, that's small, not a national chain, versus something else that could be more objectionable. And it's also helpful for the city to hear from other folks, in addition to the association and to the board. It's also helpful for people to let our elected officials know, the Common Council folks and the state folks, what the concerns are. Because a lot of times they'll say, well, we haven't, they'll assume that because they haven't heard from anyone that no one is concerned with it. But, like you said, that heat island right there, and nothing aesthetic, no planting, no anything to absorb the heat. And And I didn't realize those lights were on that late at night until I came home super late one night, and they were just blaring. And did those go into your window? The lights?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's actually a zoning violation. So that's the type of thing that we can look to help you get remedied right away. Because you shouldn't have light coming into your windows, especially bedrooms.
Yeah. Well, it's just the whole mass of property there is so problematic. I mean, I have to say, I'm very tired of the Rite Aid parking lot being used as overflow parking for Mike's and Dunkin' Donuts, because it's become sort of a truck stop, frankly.
Right, for the larger
fleets of trucks stop there in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I use the entire back lot and then go off and get their breakfast and come back. But
Right.
I just feel that's so inappropriate. And the thing is that Rite Aid, they're oblivious, or they don't care, or there's no one to enforce. I don't know. They're not paying attention.
Yeah, and I think that even with their hours now, they're not open as early as some of the customers that Mike services as well. When some of the the DPW or the other commercial trucks go in there too, and it would be I think that's we should really need to raise that with all three of them, Dunkin' Donuts and Rite Aid and Mike's. Those do you know if those trucks are idling when they go in? Do they leave those idling like in the winter or anything?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Also a violation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Patsy, let's see what we can do. I hear you.
Okay.
We'll work together. Thank you. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Diane, earlier you were talking about Jimmy's amenity points. I found them, the 20 that they have proposed for the extra height and density.
Yeah.
They're broken up into two categories to kind of equal the 20. The first one's amenity points, which is a wider sidewalk of 10 feet. That's
Right.
2 points. Public art, which is 2 points. Public bike rack, which is 1 point. And then public bicycle repair station, whatever that may be, for 1 point.
Right.
And it goes into sustainable, which is an EV level 3 charger station, 2 of them, which are 2 points. Rain garden of 500 feet, which is another 2 points. Integrated rain garden plus art for another 500 feet for 3 points. Pollinator habitat for 2 points. Passive house, whatever that may be, for 5 points. Do you know what that is, a passive house?
No, I know it has to do something with energy, but I'm not quite sure what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so it's 14 sustainable points and the rest are amenity.
Yeah, and that's how they managed to get to the maximum, because then when they kind of jury-rigged all these a la carte menus, what they ended up doing, the commissioners then were saying, if let's put a higher weight on the ones that have to do with sustainability. And but the things that ended up in that list really are just mostly for the benefit of that property owner. If you're looking at things like solar, or EV chargers, those things are for marketing to clientele as well. The thing that I noticed about Jimmy's is that if you look at the layout of what they were proposing, and then you line up the bonus amenity points, it doesn't seem that any would be in the public realm. Because if you have EV chargers and they're in a garage someplace, and the garage is not a public garage and it's not a public amenity. And if you have a pollinator, rain garden with art, and it's on the side of the building where no one walks and it's not visible from the sidewalk, then it's also not a public amenity. And I think that's part of the reason why, it may be even one of the major reasons why this thing hasn't seen the light of day, because with getting through as a full application, because it doesn't pass anybody's idea of a litmus test for what these were supposed to be. So we'll see. I mean, it could actually be withdrawn. I never know quite who's on here, but I'm not really worried about if anybody's on here from there. You could say hello if you are, but I think I mentioned at our last meeting that the rumor mill now was that he was just trying to get it to the point of an approval for EVTZ, but then sell the parcel. That he wasn't actually going to develop himself now. He was just looking to dump it. So who knows what could come of it.
Well, that was actually received and stamped by the City of Norwalk's Planning and Zoning Department on January 13th, 2025.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But that's the only document that they have is that document. They have none of the rest of what they can't consider it a complete application. So they only timestamp that, so they have a record of it, and it's also why it's not even posted on the web page that we go to. Right. But you won't even see it there, because it's incomplete.
Got it.
And it's been that way for quite some time, and then he finally actually submitted that, and that still doesn't cut it. Okay. Anybody else? I think oh my gosh, we're 8:45. I'm happy to stay on, but anybody else have their hand raised or anything else in chat?
I don't.
Should I answer anything in chat now also, Charles, for people that are going to watch the tape?
I don't see anything unless you want to address Becca's blight about the sidewalks early on and the debris.
Okay. Is that around cemetery? I think we spoke about that last month too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no action from the city.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I'm just going to have to go through to customer service and to Harry and find out what's going on. I'm hearing more and more of that, and I'm seeing it on social media too, where people are saying that things either are getting closed or they're not getting logged, or they say in progress and then they just drop off the map. So I'll see if I can get to the bottom of that. It's almost one of these false sense of security things. It might be better to not have any reporting system at all than to have one that that's nobody's doing anything with. The way it's supposed to work is that it gets funneled in through customer service as the clearinghouse, and then they assign it out to one or more responsible departments to handle. And then it's supposed to get tracked from there. But I'm just hearing too much that things are just falling through the cracks. I have a couple in there myself too that just say in progress, and I have no idea what that means. And I also don't know that I can see where it got assigned to as well, which department or departments. Because sometimes when you're filing something and there's violations, it has to go to health, fire department, zoning department, building department. There's a whole host of them. And theoretically, they're supposed to collaborate. I think they have meetings once a month where they're reviewing properties that have, multi-departmental violations that they're handling.
Okay, and lastly, has there been any communication about the Osborne Avenue Bridge replacement?
Oh, yes, I think I had that on one of my slides there. I don't see it in here. It may have been in my email, but there was a date in there. I think it said the end of March.
That's
was an updated date, and that came right from Stephanie at Walkbridge. And I had closed out my email, so I'll get that for you. But that was the latest date because I knew we were looking for that. So I think it's the end of March that was in there, but I'll double check that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Is there anybody else on the meeting? Because what we do now is Charles will actually stop the recording. We'll end the meeting, and then I'll stay on for a couple of minutes if there's someone who wanted to ask or address something but didn't want it in the recording.